Vienna, 1906. As sleet struck the copper gutters of Schönbrunn Palace, and the guards shifted their rifles under gray skies. The stables behind the imperial gardens steamed with the scent of straw and wet horse. Ferdinand Pike, sleeves rolled to the elbow, tightened the girth on the emperor's prized Lipizzanner. His hands were raw from winter, his breath a fog in the stall. He was 18, tall but still growing into it, with shoulders built by labor and a quiet way of moving that made even the colts settle down. "Ferd," hissed a voice from behind a mound of hay. "She's back." Ferdinand didn't need to ask who. Everyone in the stables had heard the carriage wheels crack over the cobblestone an hour ago. The Archduchess had returned from Paris. They said she wore French perfume and rode better than any of her cousins. They said she refused every suitor like a general rejecting bad strategy. He wiped his hands and stepped out into the courtyard just as she came through the side gate without escort, boots crunching frost on the stones. Her riding coat was midnight blue, her gloves pearl-stitched, and her dark hair was pinned back beneath a small feathered hat. "Which horse is mine?" she called, eyes scanning the rows. No one answered. The other stable boys hung back, tongues tied by class and fear. Ferdinand stepped forward. "Fourth stall on the left, Fräulein. Her name's Alva. She's been waiting." She looked at him, really looked. "You're not Austrian." "No," he said. "American-born. My father served the ambassador. I stayed." She raised one brow. "What's your name?" "Ferdinand Pike." "I'm Marietta Lindenfeld," she said, even though he obviously knew. Her voice was firm, but not cold. "Alva, then." He brought the mare, holding the reins steady while Marietta mounted without help. She rode like she didn't care who was watching. The moment she was out of sight, a stable hand elbowed Ferdinand, whispering, "You'll lose your post if you stare at her like that again." But he hadn't stared. Not really. Just watched the way her gloves gripped the reins. 3 days later, she returned early. The snow had melted into slush that soaked her hem. She dismounted without ceremony, cheeks red from riding. "You're the only one who knows how to fit my saddle right." "I watch your posture," Ferdinand said. "The others don't." A faint smile tugged her lips. "Meet me in the East Conservatory tonight. Midnight." He blinked. "That's not." "I wasn't asking," she said. That night, he came through the servants' corridor, steps muffled in felted boots. The conservatory was empty save for the scent of citrus trees and frost-touched roses. Marietta stood near a lantern, her hair down, hands bare. "I've read about you," she said softly. "Your father went missing during the Philippine conflict. You were left behind. Why didn't you return?" Ferdinand looked at the floor. "I was 12. No one came for me." She stepped closer. "You don't belong here. Not in this cold palace. Not in the stables." He met her eyes. "Where do I belong, then?" "With me," she said. He didn't kiss her, didn't touch her, just stood there, heart battering his ribs like a wild colt. The next morning, he found a note beneath a brush bucket. Her hand was precise, the ink smudged slightly at the corner. It read, "I need a tutor for fencing. My uncle refuses to allow it. Meet me in the old music room after the noon bell. Come armed." Ferdinand had learned to fence with the ambassador's son before war took him. He hadn't held a blade in years, but when he stepped into the music room shuttered and dusty, with faded portraits watching, he carried a rapier borrowed from the guard's training armory. Marietta was waiting in a linen blouse and trousers meant for riding. She tossed him a blunt-tipped foil. They didn't talk as they sparred. The blades clashed, rang, slid. She was quick, but he was quicker. When he disarmed her, her blade sliding across the floor, she laughed with breathless defiance. "Again," she said. They trained there every day for a week. Each time, she left first. Each time, he stayed behind, heart twisted in his chest. Then the rumors started. The Archduchess was being courted by a Prussian prince twice her age, with a face like a hawk and a belly like a wine barrel. The court approved. The emperor nodded. The match would strengthen the empire's eastern reach. Ferdinand didn't ask her about it. He didn't need to. The next night, she met him in the stables. "They expect me to marry him," she said, voice tight. "He smells like boiled meat." Ferdinand leaned against the stall door. "You'll say no. I'll be exiled. Then I'll go with you." She turned sharply. "You'd leave your life?" He shrugged. "It's not much of one." She stepped forward, eyes wide. "You're serious?" "I've got nothing but my name and a saddle knife. But I'll fight for you." She reached up, cupped his jaw in her gloved hand. Then I'll give you something worth fighting for. They kissed quick, desperate, like the world might end with dawn. But dawn brought worse. The Prussian prince arrived early. The palace turned to ceremony. Red carpets, trumpets, a dance announced for Saturday, with all the nobility present. Marietta sent one last note. Meet me before the dance. The old chapel. Bring your blade. There will be a duel. Ferdinand didn't hesitate. He dressed in his best boots, polished, hair combed, sword belted proper. In the chapel, light filtered through cracked stained glass. The prince stood at the altar, flanked by 2 guards. Marietta stood between them, chin high. This is the man, she said clearly. Ferdinand Pike, my chosen tutor. My chosen match. The prince laughed like a cannon. That boy. We fight, Ferdinand said quietly. Winner keeps her. The prince drew his saber. The duel was brutal. Steel on stone, the scrape of boots on marble. Ferdinand bled from the shoulder, but didn't falter. He fought with the strength of every year he'd lived unwanted. Every day he'd labored unseen. He won. The prince yielded, humiliated before his guards, before God. And Marietta stepped into Ferdinand's arms like she'd always belonged there. They left the chapel hand in hand, through the servants' door, past the stables, and out into the city. They didn't look back. The inn smelled of wood smoke and old leather, the fire in the hearth burning low as twilight pressed against the leaded windows. They had taken a small room above the stables behind the Schottenkirche, far enough from the palace to breathe freely, yet close enough for news to reach them before it turned to rumor. Marietta sat at the narrow table, her riding gloves drying by the coals, while Ferdinand checked the latch on the door for the 3rd time. You think they'll come tonight? She said, not questioning, only confirming. They won't risk it before the papers soften the story. If he admits defeat outright, he loses twice. Ferdinand leaned against the doorframe, sleeves damp from melting snow. But they'll come eventually. That's certain. Marietta didn't flinch. She was reading a folded sheet, the corner of a courier's seal still pressed into the paper. My cousin in Trieste writes that the emperor has not spoken publicly, but the court has begun whispering about annulment of titles. They're weighing whether my choice was treason or madness. Ferdinand crossed to her. They'll see it was neither. They won't, she said. But I don't need them to. He took the note from her gently and set it aside. The flickering light painted her features in soft gold, and for a moment, the hush between them was complete. I've spent every year of my life trying to be good enough for them, she said, voice quiet but not fragile. Good enough to be useful, but never enough to be free. You're free now? She looked up at him. Not yet. They'll try to drag me back. They'll say I've been misled. That you're nothing. Let them, he said. The next morning brought cold sun, and a letter wrapped in royal wax slipped under their door. Ferdinand opened it slowly, scanning the script. No seal of exile. No threats, only a summons. They want to meet, he said. Not in court. Privately. The Hofburg. The emperor himself. Marietta folded her hands. He won't yell. He'll ask questions. He'll try to understand. Will you go? I must, she said. They'll use decorum like a cage. Ferdinand nodded. Then I'll ride with you. Not as your guard. As your equal. At the Hofburg, they were received in a drawing room lined with tapestries older than either of them. The emperor stood by the window, his beard streaked in silver, his uniform immaculate. No one else spoke. No ministers. No scribes. You rode through a marriage alliance, he said to Marietta, eyes not unkind but sharp as frost. One we spent 2 years shaping. You embarrassed a prince of Saxony on holy ground. She held her gaze level. I chose the man I trust with my life. The emperor turned to Ferdinand. And you? What do you want? To serve the crown, Ferdinand said. But not by cleaning its boots. There was a pause, long and quiet. You fence well, the emperor said. I fight better when I must. The emperor's face softened just slightly. You've humiliated a man with powerful allies. That cannot go unanswered. Then answer it with a commission, Ferdinand said. Make me visible. Make me useful. The emperor studied him. You're asking for what? A place in your guard corps. Not as a novelty. Train me. Test me. Let me earn it. And if you fail, then send me away. No theatrics. No punishment for her. The emperor looked at Marietta. You're certain? I will not return to the court unmarried, she said. If I must marry under your law, it will be to this man. He gave a slow nod. Then prove yourself, he said to Ferdinand. You'll join the guard as a probationary officer. Uniformed. Observed. You'll sleep in the barracks and train with the infantry. If you last the winter, I'll grant her petition. And if I don't? Ferdinand asked. She'll be escorted to Saxony under armed guard. The emperor said flatly. No more indulgence. Outside, the sky had brightened behind thin clouds. As they walked through the palace gate, Ferdinand kept his hand just behind her back, not touching, but close. You don't have to do this, she said. I've done harder things with less reason, he replied. And never with you waiting on the other side. That night, he reported to the barracks. The guards looked at him with narrowed eyes and concealed laughter. He slept on a straw mattress beside men who spoke 6 languages and trusted no one. At dawn, they ran drills in snow that iced over their boots. Ferdinand's palms split during sword drills. He bled quietly and kept going. Marietta sent no letters. Not once. Not even when the newspapers speculated on her exile. But one morning, after nearly 2 months had passed, he found a small envelope hidden inside his boot wrapping. No seal, just his name, written in her hand. Inside was a pressed sprig of rosemary. Nothing else. He folded it into his breast pocket and said nothing. 3 days later, he passed the final riding trial, leaping the imperial course without a fault. As he dismounted, a captain handed him a folded decree. It bore the emperor's hand. Marietta Lindenfeld, by sovereign decree, was released from all prior marital obligations. And Ferdinand Pike, stable-born and foreign-blooded, was named a wielder of the crown's guard, with full rank, rights, and honors. He did not run to her. He walked, through the palace gates, through the snow, through the silence of the city. She met him at the edge of the Ringstrasse, beneath the stone lions. You came, she said, eyes bright. I never left, he answered. She reached for his hand, no gloves, nothing between them. They walked on, side by side, into a world that had finally, undeniably, made room for them. The velvet of spring pressed gently along the banks of the Danube, and the city's breath thawed with the budding of sycamore leaves against the palace walls. Ferdinand's uniform tailored now, not borrowed, fitted square across his shoulders as he stood at parade rest beneath the colonnade of the Hofburg's southern wing, his sword at his left, his gloves tucked beneath his belt. Behind him, the great bronze doors of the treasury remained closed, but he could feel their weight like a held breath. Marietta approached without announcement, her skirts trimmed in pale celadon silk, the color soft as new willow shoots. He noticed the pendant at her throat, an oval of onyx with a single gold rivet at its center, not expensive, but deliberate. She stopped beside him, not quite touching. They've assigned me to the commission for the Carniolan rail, she said. I leave for Laibach in 4 days. He didn't answer at once. The leaves overhead rustled like a whisper, and the city's bells struck the quarter hour. Will you go alone? No, she said. My father insists I bring a chaperone. Frau Osterwald. She embroiders petitioners' coats of arms in her sleep. Her voice dipped, not quite wry. Ferdinand's jaw tightened slightly. They're sending you to quiet the court. They're sending me because I speak Slovene, and the provincial counts have begun to stall construction. The emperor won't risk another winter delay. He turned toward her only slightly. You'll be gone until midsummer. She nodded. We'll write. He looked away then, toward the gravel path that wound down to the imperial greenhouses. I can't post letters from the barracks. They're screened. I know, she said, but I've spoken to someone. Captain Emil Hartwig. You drilled under him last month. He taught us field salutes. He also carries dispatches to the Ministry of Commerce. He'll take messages coded, short, not love letters, Ferdinand. Just enough to remind you I'm not gone. His breath caught, just briefly. Why him? He owes my mother a favor, she said simply. And he's bored with Vienna. He stepped back from the marble column, just enough to face her fully. You think I'm strong enough to wait, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch you leave. She didn't smile. Then don't watch. Just meet me when I return. Their hands did not touch. They didn't need to. She turned without ceremony, the hems of her dress brushing the stone in soft rhythm. He watched her go until the corridor swallowed her completely. The next 4 weeks passed with the distant rhythm of boots on gravel, ink on ration slips, and the muted clang of sabers drawn in practice. Ferdinand rose before the bell most mornings, not from obligation, but because sleep came shallow and left early. His commission papers were being drafted. He was learning the intricacies of ceremonial code, how to speak without speaking, how to recognize the tilt of a general's head as a command. On the 7th Tuesday, word came that the rail line had collapsed near Grossupolch. 2 men were lost, 1 injured. The Empress's physician was dispatched to the site. Ferdinand volunteered to ride with the escort. His request was denied. That night, in the courtyard behind the officers' quarters, Captain Hartwig crossed to him under the cover of darkness. He carried a folded strip of linen, stitched with a pattern of white thread. She sewed it into her cuff, the captain said. Opened it when no one looked. Ferdinand unfolded it carefully. The thread formed a single phrase, in Latin. No force can bend what roots in stone. He breathed once, deeply, and tucked it beneath his shirt. By early June, the city had shifted into its summer dress. Parasols along the Ringstrasse, opera notes drifting from open windows, and the slow return of court officials from their country estates. Ferdinand had not seen Marietta in 63 days. On the 64th, he received an invitation. The Imperial Art Exhibition, private viewing, guests selected by the Archduchess of Carniola. His name was written in her hand. He arrived in full dress uniform, boots polished, insignia gleaming beneath the lanterns of the Belvedere Palace's north wing. The gallery was nearly empty, only a few military attaches, a countess with a glass of cordial, a minister's daughter admiring a Flemish triptych. Marietta stood alone before a canvas near the back wall. It depicted a bridge half-finished spanning a valley in soft gray dusk. The brushwork was careful, almost solemn. She turned as he approached, her hair pinned in a new style, more severe, and her gloves looped over one wrist. You came, she said. I would have crossed the Alps. I nearly didn't return, she said. I steady. The province offered me a position permanent advisory. I would have had my own household. A title. Autonomy. His voice was quiet. But not me. She reached into the small embroidered reticule at her side and withdrew a folded square of parchment. The emperor signed this 2 days ago. It makes my appointment to the Ministry of Internal Affairs official. I'll oversee infrastructure for all the southern provinces. He didn't touch it. That's not ceremonial. No, she said. It's more than they ever intended to give me. And what did you promise them? That I would marry within the year. A match of my choosing. Someone born under the crown. Someone who has proved his loyalty. His breath caught. She stepped closer. They gave me 3 names. One is a diplomat. One a colonel. And the third. She looked up at him, not blinking. A crown wielder. He stood still, not trusting himself to speak. She reached for his hand, fingers bare, and placed a ring in his palm. Not jeweled. Simple silver, engraved with a single date. The day we met, she said. He closed his fist around it. They stood together as the gallery emptied, the hush of the palace settling around them like a final chord. No one watched, but even if they had, neither would have let go. The late summer sunlight slanted through the tall windows of the ministry's south wing, casting long amber lines across the parquet floors. Marietta stood near the drafting tables, her sleeves rolled, a sheaf of vellum in her hands. She wore no jewelry today, only a narrow leather band at her wrist, ink smudged faintly along one thumb. The engineers had just cleared the room, leaving behind the scent of chalk and glue, and she hadn't noticed Ferdinand enter until the door clicked softly behind him. You're early, she said, not turning. I finished patrol before the bell. There was nothing left to wait for. She set the parchment down. They approved the second tunnel for the Selge route. It'll double freight capacity before the winter freeze. You'll be remembered for that. She finally turned. I don't want to be remembered for stone and timetables. He stepped closer, the room quiet but charged. Then what? Her mouth opened, then shut again. She reached for the glass of water on the table, took a careful sip, then met his eyes. Do you remember the old hunting cottage above the vineyards at Gumpolskirchen? I passed it once with the infantry. The roof looked like it might slide off in the next rainfall. It's mine now, she said. My mother's dowry deeded it to me quietly last year. I've had it restored. The roof's new. The foundations are sound. Ferdinand waited. I've told them we're marrying in the new year, she said. But I won't be paraded through the Hofburg with a dozen liveried attendants and a crystal carriage. I want it done at that cottage. With just the witnesses the law requires. No one else. He blinked slowly. And the emperor? He signed off on it this morning, she said. But only if you remain stationed within 50 kilometers of Vienna. No transfers to Hungary. No field campaigns. I don't want to leave the capital, he said. Not anymore. She leaned back against the edge of the table, her fingers curling around the wood. I sent word to my father only an hour ago. He won't come. But he won't stop me. Did you expect him to? I never expect anything from him, she said. It's the only way to survive his silences. Ferdinand stepped beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder. What happens after the vows? I keep my post. You keep yours. We maintain separate legal titles. But everything else, she turned toward him fully now, everything else, we choose together. He reached up, brushed a stray strand of hair back behind her ear. Will there be time for us? Between rails and regiments. There has to be, she said. Or none of this was worth the cost. They stood there a while, the muffled sound of a carriage passing below the only thing breaking the stillness. Then she picked up the folded blueprint from the table and handed it to him. It's the floor plan for the cottage, she said. There's a loft space above the main room. I thought we could build a small library up there. You always read late. He ran a thumb along the edge of the paper. You remembered that. I remember everything, she said. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in and kissed her, not urgently, but with the certainty of someone who no longer feared being seen. When they parted, she rested her forehead lightly against his. We'll need to choose a witness for you. Mine's already arranged. Who? Captain Hartwig, she said. He asked for nothing in return. It seemed right to ask him. Ferdinand nodded. Then I'll ask the woman who raised me after my father disappeared. She lives near the river. She sold laundry to the court kitchens for 20 years. She'll have a seat of honor, Marietta said. Outside, the bells of the Augustinian church began to ring, and neither of them moved. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, preparations unfolded with quiet efficiency. The cottage was whitewashed, the hearth repaired. Marietta oversaw the transport of 2 trunks of books and a single oil portrait her mother's, painted before the illness took her. Ferdinand rode out twice a week after drills, clearing the garden beds and sanding the threshold by hand. No announcements were made in the society pages. No invitations sent to foreign courts. On the first clear day of November, they rode out together, just the 2 of them, cloaks drawn close against the wind. At the gate of the cottage, Frau Eliska, the woman who had once patched Ferdinand's shirts with thread spun from her own apron ties, waited with a small bouquet of rosemary and pine. Marietta took it without a word. Inside, the hearth glowed low, and the notary from Baden sat with his ledger open on his lap. The ceremony lasted fewer than 10 minutes. No vows were spoken aloud beyond the legal phrases. But when the ring was placed on her finger, and then his, their hands remained clasped long after the ink had dried. That night, as the sky darkened into frost, Ferdinand lit a single candle in the loft above the main room. Marietta stepped inside to find the books already shelved, the rug laid out, and 2 chairs placed beside the narrow window. He held out a folded sheet. She took it, opened it, and read the title. Plans for spring, new routes, new roof lines. You wrote this? She asked. He nodded. It's not official. Just thoughts. For the land behind the cottage. Maybe a second dwelling. Or a small stable. She leaned her head against his shoulder. We only just arrived. We have time, he said. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in either of their lives, nothing waited to be earned. Nothing waited to be taken. Only the quiet certainty that they had found the stillness they had fought for. Together.